Thanks, everybody, and thank you for caring so much. Look, this issue, I'm speaking, of course, to Jewish Democrats. Two attributes I share with you, that I'm Jewish and I'm a Democrat. But this issue is a bipartisan issue, and we're keeping it as bipartisan as possible. I just wanted to say that at the outset. Now, as many of you know, I had left to go to China on Thursday last week. We went to China, and then, of course, on Saturday, the horrible, outrageous terrorist attack on so many innocent Israelis, brutal, vicious, occurred. I did a little good in China, as you know. I confronted President Xi himself, who met with us, that China's statement initially about this did not mention terrorism, did not mention innocent victims, did not mention Hamas. And amazingly, I confronted him with this, and the next day they modified their statement. Not good enough for what I would like, but certainly a modification, which he never does. He also said to us in the meeting when I brought this up that he supports a two-state solution. I said, well, I hope you know, Mr. President, in all due respect, Hamas does not. They don't believe there should be any Jews in Israel. They want a Palestinian state between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. And if they had their way, they do to the Jews and the rest of Israel what they did to the Jews in Gaza, if you read some of their statements and what they believe in. I also asked him there to put pressure on Iran to not escalate the conflict, and he said that he would pass that along to them. But I couldn't stay there. Being the first Jewish majority leader, being the highest ranking Jewish elected official ever in America, I knew I had to leave. So we cut back our trip short, and I went to Israel with a bipartisan group on Saturday. Our mission was three. One, to show the Israelis that Americans stood up for them and were with them all the way. Israel was so shaken by what happened. And why was Hamas so vicious? Well, one of the reasons was they wanted to scare everybody. They wanted to make everyone so afraid of Hamas that everyone would isolate Israel, and even the Israelis would not fight back. That was a pure miscalculation on their part. But us going there and saying we stood with Israel meant so much. We're still hearing about it from everybody under the sun, how important it was. So that was issue number one, to say we stand by Israel. Second was to sit down with the leadership, and we met with everybody. We met, of course, with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We met with Mr. Gantz. We met with the defense minister. We met with President Herzog. You name it, we met with them. And we asked them what Israel needed. And needed, of course, on the military side, things like more stuff for air defense, for Iron Dome, stuff like 155 millimeter ammunition, stuff like JRAMs and things like that we asked for. And we asked them what they needed on the humanitarian side. And because Israel, we told everybody we met that there's got to be, we cannot play by the rules of Hamas. We're much better than that. And we have to play try to minimize civilian casualties on the Palestinian side and what they needed there. But we got a long list of everything they needed. And so far, our government is doing every single thing that Israel has asked. I have to say that President Biden has been just fabulous. I'm so glad he's there today, standing by Israel. Third, we wanted to show that support for Israel was bipartisan. And that's why of the four members I chose to go with me, two were Democrats and two were Republicans. Senator Rosen, who introduces herself as the only Jewish mother. I'm the only Jewish majority leader, but she's the only Jewish mother. Senator Kelly, who has a great military background, as well as Senator Romney and Senator Cassidy. And we were a great team together. And so we showed the bipartisanship. So we have three goals here as Israel. One is to eliminate the threat to Hamas. The idea that Hamas should remain in place, that there should be a ceasefire after everything they did, and is a very, very bad idea. If Hamas is left to its own devices, it'll repeat what it did last time. Second is to free the hostages. There are close to 200, some of them American. Let me tell you, we met with the families of the 12 12 of the families of hostages. There was not a dry eye in the house. We were openly weeping when they told us the stories of what happened and their anguish. I remember one mom said, every minute seems like a day. She's in such pain and suffering. Another of them said, I have to ask myself, would I rather my child be dead or in the hands of these vicious terrorists? Can you imagine? And they showed us some videos because Hamas, being as evil and vicious as it is, took some videos of them taking prisoners away, taking hostages away, even hurting some of them, shooting some of them. It was vicious and horrible. And it was amazing. And we said to the families, we would do everything we could. And yesterday, before President Biden left, the 5 of us were on the phone with the president talking about how we could help with the hostages. The U.S. is working very diligently there through other countries and doing everything it could. We also experienced the danger that every Israeli faces. We were having lunch at a hotel in Tel Aviv, far away from Gaza. And of course, we were rushed to a shelter because the missiles were overhead, sent by Hamas from Gaza to Tel Aviv. And of course, thank God we were okay. And the stories we heard about Be'eri, the kibbutz, where 100 Jews were members of the kibbutz were herded into the rec room, aged from the elderly to little tiny children and tots, and then they machine gunned every one of them down. And it reminded me of my family story. Most of us who are Jewish have, you know, this so hurts our souls. My great-grandmother was a leading citizen of the town of Chortkiv in what was then called Galicia, now Western Ukraine. The Nazis came into the town, ordered the Jews of Chortkiv to gather in the town square, told my grandmother, whose husband had been a famous rabbi, he was deceased, to gather her family on the porch. She did, her greater family. She gathered approximately 35 people from ages 88 to 3 months. They said, come with us. She said, we're not going. And they machine gunned every one of them down. So when I heard the story of Be'eri, it reminded me, of course, again, of something I've thought about. So October 7th is going to be a day that will live in infamy. And my role as majority leader, I am going to get the largest, best, quickest package to help Israel with military aid, intelligence aid, diplomatic aid, and humanitarian aid to Israel. And probably, by the way, as you've heard, speaking of humanitarian, and we regret the loss of any life, any innocent life. Now there's proof put out by the Israelis that the rocket, of course, was not from the from Israel, but rather was from one of the Palestinian groups that works with Hamas. And this is what Israel's up against. Israel didn't put out a statement immediately because they were checking it. They wanted the truth. Hamas immediately said, oh, the IDF did it. They lie through their teeth. And, you know, for 6 hours, the world blamed Israel unfairly. Now the word is getting out, and I think all of us have an obligation to get that proof out that the IDF showed about that. But in any case, we're going to get the biggest aid package we can. I'm in sync with Leader McConnell. People will say, well, what about the House? The House is sort of a mess. But our view is if we can get a strong bipartisan package of aid on the Senate floor and it passes by a large number of votes, it's going to put real pressure on the House, whatever their situation is. I think they're voting now, again, for a speaker. But whether they have a speaker or not, there are ways that they could get this done, and we're going to put as much pressure on them by passing a big bipartisan package as we can. Leader McConnell and I are working closely together on this, so this is important. So that's the bottom line. Let me just conclude by telling you a little bit about my father, which you'll see its relevance. My father had a tough life, but he taught me that he was an exterminator, never was able to go to college or make much of himself economically, but he was a fine, wonderful man. And he passed away a couple of years ago, almost a couple of years ago. In November, it'll be 2 years. But he left me with values. One value, always help people who need help, which I always try to do in my elected life. Number 2 value, he told me that if you're doing something important, look in your heart. Make sure it's the right thing to do. and then persist and persist and persist, and God will reward you and you will succeed. Together, we will persist and will persist and persist. And we will make sure that Israel eliminates the threat to Hamas, does everything it can to get the hostages out, does everything it can in a very, very difficult job to minimize innocent civilians who are hurt in this, whether they be Palestinian or Israeli, making sure, of course, whatever aid we give, the humanitarian aid, does not end up in Hamas's hands. But if we persist, we'll succeed. So to my fellow Jewish Democrats, remember, whether it's in America or in Israel, Am Yisrael Chai, people Israel live. Thank you. Hatzlacha, continued success.